It's pretty much like a second DH is the way that I look at it. You fundamentally get a better hitter in your lineup, and your team is better defensively at the same time.
How did this guy, the same guy who exposed the MLB's foreign substance scandal, come up with a very simple idea that will most likely change baseball forever? Well, the answer is he was just trying to do a good job at his day job. Joel LaFlamme is a screenwriter who figured the best way to make a compelling TV series would be to change the very game it's about. I spent over an hour talking to Joel. We dove into how he came up with such a simple yet impactful idea. He shared it all: the massive potential impacts, the math behind it adding 5 wins per team, and why players will actually love it. Now let's get into it with the man himself. I'm Frank Michael Smith, and this is Big. Welcome, Joel. It's great to have you here. I figure the best way to actually kick things off is you just giving a very simple breakdown of how the LaFlamme Shift works.
Well, we have left fielders and right fielders. Pretty much just throw away that idea. There will be no more left fielders and right fielders under this concept. There will be a center fielder. They stay right in the middle. But what you do is, instead of trying to put 3 solid outfielders out there to cover the outfield, because there are no shift rules. So the idea is get a strong center fielder up the middle. Then your next best fielder will rotate based on the pull side of the hitter. Righties are 66% of batters in Major League Baseball. So 66% of the time, you're going to put your pull side fielder in left field. The other 33% of the time, you're going to shift them into right. It seems like a difficult thing. People are going to go, oh, you can't, that's going to be a lot of running. But there's natural ways that this can be implemented into your strategy.
Now, we're going to dive deeper in a minute, but I wanted to spend a little bit of time circling back on how Joel actually came up with the idea.
I was sitting down and I was pretty much conceiving a baseball series that I had written, and my main character needed to do something to pretty much prove that her intellect in the game, was valid. She's almost like a Nepo baby. She's a legacy coming into the game at a very young age. So people don't really believe that she has the chops to do her job. So she comes in with this concept that she thinks that'll really, really change the game. And that's kind of where I was sitting. I was sitting down trying to conceive something that would have a long lasting appeal, change the game in some way, shape, or form. And this one just kind of naturally came to me.
Immediately, I know we all have a similar reaction and that this feels odd or maybe even excessive. Baseball is a sport rooted in tradition, but Joel explained why it's more natural than meets the eye.
It seems like a difficult thing. People are going to go, oh, you can't, that's going to be a lot of running. But there's natural ways that this can be implemented into your strategy. Like the first batter of every single inning, you're going out shifted. So that's one. Pitchers have 2 disengagements per plate appearance. So that gives you a timeout to just say, oh, let the pitch clock tick down to 8 seconds, call your timeout, use your disengagement. It'll look silly because you're sitting there on the mound as your outfielders are shifting, but then you just use your disengagement, resets the clock, gives your outfielders enough time to get set in their positions. Then you also have 4 mound visits for the first 8 innings of the game. In the 9th inning, you get a 5th. Every pitching change, you get to shift. And the fact, like I said, 66% of batters are right-handed. So it's not every single batter shifting back and forth. Sometimes you might only be shifting once or twice over the course of a lineup.
Hopefully the concept is clear, so let's talk scale. Joel did a great job explaining how this goes far beyond defense.
Well, that's half of the equation. The other half is the fact that you can take a guy who you're very uncomfortable with, like Teoscar Hernandez, a Kyle Schwarber, and Nick Castellanos, and you can comfortably put them into the outfield without worrying about their defensive liabilities. So a guy like Kyle Schwarber now can be an outfielder without you worrying so much about how they're going to cost you games, because they just don't have the defensive impact that they once did. So you're able to not only cover a bad fielder, but be really confident in putting a guy like Jorge Soler in the outfield. It's pretty much like a second DH is the way that I look at it, which was a strategy baseball was thinking of implementing, bringing a second DH and taking your next worst hitter out of the lineup and replacing it with a second DH. Now this is just a natural way of doing it, putting a bad fielder out in the field, but he's not going to face that many plays over the course of the year. So you fundamentally get a better hitter in your lineup, and your team is better defensively at the same time.
All right, let's break down a little bit of math. If implemented properly, how many runs could this really save a team? How many wins does that equal? And how much money is it worth?
All right, let's imagine it from the most profitable sense, the ideal situation. So if you've got a guy like Jesse Winker, another guy on the Mets, somebody who's in the like minus 14 DRS range, so he's costing you 14 runs. You can get him to maybe minus 9, minus 8. So that's 6 or 7 runs. But then the fact that you're able to replace somebody like a 6 650 OPS outfielder. Let's imagine that. Say you've got a guy who's about a 650 OPS outfielder, but now you're replacing that with a guy who's about an 800 OPS. Every 20 points of OPS is about 3 runs. So that 150 point OPS increase plus the defensive runs that you're saving, that's 25, 30, 35 runs that you're saving potentially over the course of the season. That's using it all the time. That doesn't mean that some teams won't implement this in the 7th inning, 8th inning, 9th inning when they have a lead. But if you're able to save yourself 35 to 40 runs, that's 4 wins. 4 to 5 wins financially on the free agent market is something like $35 million. $35 million boosted onto your team that costs you nothing. For some teams, that's doubling their payroll. Previously Oakland, all of a sudden a $40 million payroll becomes an $80 million payroll with one basic defensive shift like that. So it could be a staggering element where a team that was a 500 team is all of a sudden battling for wildcard. Wildcard teams are now battling for divisions. It could be that one extra round you win in the postseason. Hell, it could lead to a World Series win.
Now, Joel's received a ton of pushback on the player side. By far, the most common question is, will players actually want to do this? His response is perfect.
Yeah, I really don't understand. You kind of see it in softball, right? With the rover, that person that goes out and that extra outfielder that's kind of shifting from play to play. But you've never seen it in Major League Baseball. I was actually talking to Bob Nightingale about it, and he's like, oh, I don't know if players would be so into that. And my response to that was, well, if you become a more valuable player, you become worth more money. And I don't think any player is ever going to be against making more money. The idea, I feel like, would eventually circulate down through youth baseball so that the concept of a left fielder and a right fielder would just be kind of obsolete at some point.
At this point, I couldn't shake the thought that all of this came from Joel's TV series, Wildcard, and he had a little bit more in store.
Don't get me wrong, I wish it came out first in my series, but at the same time, I've got a few other strategical changes to the game that I'm holding on to that I can implement in the series as well. I'm kind of letting one go here to show the possibility of things, and if people want to see more, then the show gets picked up and you'll see one in season 2, season 3, season 4, and consistent changes to the game, hopefully over a long-lasting TV series.
To cap things off, I asked Joel to bust out the crystal ball and predict what will happen when the first team actually uses this.
I would hope my series would get picked up because this is just step 1 of honestly 5 different changes that could massively change the game. The next things that I would see happening is teams kind of applying it across all levels, looking at players that they have in their minor leagues that could assist them at least in this season. And then they start to change their management style, their team building style built around this. And hopefully you see it sweep not just the major leagues, the minor leagues, international leagues, and the way kids are brought up playing the game. So hopefully it has a very widespread effect on all baseball on all levels.
Huge thank you to Joel for joining us here. I truly believe the LaFlamme Shift can and will change baseball. The fact that he debuted it here with me is an honor. If anyone watching is interested in his TV series Wildcard, I'm going to leave his email in the caption here. That's it. I'm Frank Michael Smith, and this is Big.